Welcome to a very special episode from Warwick Podcast Society, where today we are in conversation with Dr. Andrew Lockett, with an established career of over 14 years in academia, specializing in strategy and entrepreneurship. You may very popularly know him as the Dean of Warwick Business School. Thank you for speaking to us today.
Absolute pleasure.
So, 14 years at Warwick now.
Yes.
What has that journey been like?
The Warwick journey has been it's been a remarkable journey. So I came here in 2010 as a professor from the University of Nottingham. I was attracted to it because Warwick's it's a phenomenal university. I came here with no intention of taking on an administrative role or a leadership role, and things have gradually got out of hand. And so I joined within 3 or 4 weeks. I was made head of the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Group, and then I moved on to an associate dean role. I moved on to be a pro-dean, a deputy dean, and then in 2016 went through the process of applying for the dean's position when it came up, became dean. And so yeah, it's been a fantastic journey, one which I never envisaged would have started at the beginning.
That's interesting. But like you said, you weren't really anticipating more administration roles, but you have been very inclined towards education, right? So how did that happen?
So okay, why did I join academia?
Yes.
Probably a number of reasons. One is I always found studying fun. Not that I was the most disciplined student, so I was easily distracted. Doing research and teaching is fun. I mean, particularly research is an amazing thing. It's a hobby rather than work, and also you get the ability to hang around with incredibly interesting people and clever people. So it's always nice to be in a room where there's a lot more clever people than you. And I think for me, that's allied to the fact it's a very international job. So I come from a small village in the north of Derbyshire, and being around all these international people who are interesting and fun, it's great. And so there's probably an element of Peter Pan in me not wanting to grow up. So I must confess.
Absolutely. And, just talking about that, this is a special year for Warwick, right? It turns 60.
It is.
So how have you seen WBS, Warwick Business School, evolve over this time?
Well, the business school's just becoming increasingly complex in terms of scale, in terms of what we do. Endless buildings, so we've had a huge extension since we've been in here. And for me, since being here in 2010, the school is kind of, I'd say, unrecognisable in terms of scale, complexity, size, but also in terms of status, in terms of where we are, in terms of some of our ranking positions. It's been a really interesting journey, and yeah, it's one which I think we're looking forward to the next 10 years.
Absolutely. I think you spoke about status and you spoke about ranking, which very closely links to then industry. And we were going through some recent articles and some recent things. There was recently a C-suite roundtable to discuss the MBA curriculum.
Yes.
And with now the technology evolving
Yes.
rapidly. So how is WBS adapting to the changing industry?
Well, in terms of the curricula, that's something we endlessly do. We talk to employers all the time. We look at workforce demands. We look at technology trends. Those are kind of constants we will always do, and that feeds into a constant process of renewal and recycle for our programmes. But I think we've got to come back to some very, very core bits where actually when we look at what students need to do, we really need to focus on the basics, which is basically students understanding human beings, understanding organisations, and that doesn't change. Context changes, but the fundamental social principles don't change. And that for me is what we've got to have the core of the educational programme. So when you go out, your biggest challenge will be understanding people you work with, understanding the groups you work in, how to have influence in those groups. And for me, then that's what we should be equipping people for.
Absolutely. And in the MBA program especially, we get a lot of advice around networking, keeping up with industry trends. But if I were to flip that question a little bit and ask you about one unconventional advice that you would like to give to students that we have here, what would that be?
So one of the unconventional, I'd start with always appreciate the usefulness of useless knowledge. So one of the problems we have is students and society will say, I need to know things which are relevant. Relevance is very temporally defined. Things change, context changes. I'm always struck by the most intelligent people tend to be the least dismissive people. Most people have a trend to be dismissive of ideas. The one thing to do is make sure you absorb as much as you can, because you'll never know when that information will be useful to you. So just always remember the usefulness of useless knowledge. So the classic case in point was someone like Steve Jobs did a course in calligraphy, just genuinely interested in calligraphy, and you look at the way Apple typeface is set out and the beauty of some of the Apple early products, he's absorbed information when it wasn't necessarily relevant to him at the time. That, I would say, is a challenge for everybody. It's so easy to be dismissive.
You're right, and I think that's a very interesting point, because when we get into our journey of getting that degree, we focus too much on whether this will help me land a job.
Yes.
And not about whether this interests me and, can I do something beyond that.
And that's right, because you will not know now what the challenges will lie ahead and when those bits of information will become important. So one of the things is just absorb that information, and then that gives you the ability to think through problems from first principles.
Absolutely. I think in a lot of courses that we see, especially the master's program, there are quite a lot of international students who are looking to make that triple jump, right? Industry, roles in countries. So how have you seen WBS support them in this?
That's a good question. So you're right. So as we become increasingly international, one of the challenges of it is how do we, well, I'd say, for want of a better word, service that constituent base. Well, that's something we've always done. And part of it is around understanding each individual's journey is unique. How do you prepare people for that? There is no prescriptive toolkit you can do. It's about people understanding what motivates them, what they want to do, understanding their career will be in different episodes. Those episodes may take them into a more entrepreneurial space, into a more corporate space, may take them internationally. The one huge benefit you have with Warwick and being a student and moving into the alumni community is wherever you are in the world, there's a huge number of people you can draw on very quickly. And I think that's a huge resource. So I think within our alumni community, there's not a question you can't get answered quite quickly on a very specific issue. If you turned up in Morocco tomorrow, there'll be Warwick alumni in Morocco, and you're able to actually access them and to chat to them and actually get information about how you settle into a place. So I think for us, this is what we do. It's about centering the educational journey around that. But it's so much more than what we just do in the classroom. It's all about the transformation piece, which sits in the extracurricular space as well. And that, for me, is pivotal in terms of the education piece.
Absolutely. I think as part of the MBA program, the course on Leadership Plus,
yes,
which is something that's extremely unique.
It is a unique program, so it's a unique part of the course. It's something we're really proud of, something we've worked on, and we know has incredibly transformational impact on individuals. And so that for me is fantastic. But the Leadership Plus program is just the start of that. That's it. And so it's giving you the foundational bits for you to ask yourself the right questions.
Right, absolutely. So like I said, the Leadership Plus is one, and you spoke about the Alum Network. If I were to, what is one other thing that you think sets Warwick apart?
So I came to Warwick in 2010 as an established professor, and I was down at Imperial College. I think it was the medical school from memory, or some part of the medical school. There's a big project on looking at translational healthcare, and I gave a presentation, and I remember at the end of it, I think the medic came up to me and said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Warwick Business School, University of Warwick." He said, "I could tell that." What was his phrase? Forthright, straightforward and clear, just like a Warwick person. And I thought, well, that for me was, well, first of all, I'm really happy someone says you're straightforward and clear and forthright. That was good. I didn't think I was particularly provocative that day. But what was really nice was the thought that that's kind of how a Warwick person's thought of. And for me, I think the difference Warwick has from the Golden Triangle is it's based in the region. And so it's in a region, it's in the West Midlands, it's not in a privileged part of the world. So this is for me, it's a very, very straightforward place. It hasn't got 900 years of history. We're coming to our 60th year. It's a self-made institution. So to borrow a phrase, if you think that the Who had a famous song, Substitute, which said I was born with a plastic spoon in my mouth rather than a silver spoon. So I always think of the Oxbridge as a silver spoon, we're the plastic spoon, but still we're able to compete and do things just differently to what they do.
Absolutely. I think I love the analogy of the plastic spoon that you spoke about. It really made me think. And you spoke about alums and you spoke about the global presence of Warwick.
Yeah.
And recently you had the opportunity to go around the world. You did a world tour. You spoke to a lot of MBA graduates. So what was your most interesting observation?
Well, I've recently just come back from India, which is an amazing country. It's such a positive country to visit. I've visited a few times now. And that blew me away. And I'll just focus my answer on India. What I really found incredible was the emotional reaction our alumni have to being alumni of Warwick. And so it's such a powerful thing about when you talk to the alumni, and it wasn't just the MBA alum, it was undergraduate and master's students. And actually, there was a number of people across the whole university alumni. And it was basically the importance of Warwick to them, the importance of Warwick in terms of their development, but also just a general sense of pride in having done that. And so that for me it's always nice to go out and to visit our alumni community because it reaffirms the importance of what we do and all faculty do. And I would suggest all faculty should have the opportunity to do that. It'd be fantastic.
That sounds great. You should do that for students as well.
Well, once you join the alumni community, these events are all over the world, and so whenever you're visiting, one of the important bits, if you're flying through Dubai and there's an event on, go to the event because it's a way of meeting different alum.
That's great. I think that's wonderful. We spoke about leadership last, and we spoke about leadership. So I'm very interested to know what is that one piece of advice you've received, which now you've incorporated into your leadership style.
So I have the fortune that I have done some writing on leadership. And so I had probably spent a little bit more time thinking about it than... So this probably doesn't distill down into one piece of advice. But for me, I mean, I think there's probably three things to focus on. I think there's a lot of expectations of what we expect a leader to be. We expect a leader to be... I mean, your traditional role models of this are this sort of tall, handsome, predominantly male. Okay, I'm not handsome. I'm not particularly tall. Not tall at all. And so you've got to do it your own way. Don't feel that there's a particular way you need to behave because you need to do it your own way. Secondly, is that the leadership certainly isn't about an individual. It's about a social process between people. So this is not about one individual can achieve things, but they can only achieve things when done in conjunction with others. And so for me, it's a team sport rather than individual sport. And the third piece of advice would be, and this is something which I think I've reflected on more and more, is if you think if you think from organisational theory, you've kind of got two kind of forms of control in organisations. And I say control loosely, I'm not talking telling people what to do. You've got kind of normative control or coercive control, and for me, normative control always trumps coercive control. It's about people understanding how they make a positive contribution to an organisation, and people genuinely want to do the right thing, and it's providing the conditions and providing them the direction around that, and that for me is it's just enabling people to do their jobs properly. And that normative control, when people look at others and they see the right role models, that should take care of itself.
Right, that's very interesting. It was also a very good refresher on organizational behavior, which we just finished last term. But thank you for that. That's an
interesting one. That is the module where most students see the relevance of that later in their career rather than early. Because as you move from functional and technical work into sort of more clearly leadership roles, that's the bit where the number of times people have come back to me and said, I didn't really see the importance of organisational behaviour 5 to 10 years ago, but now that's probably the most important module to me. As I said, it's back to that temporality of relevance in terms of knowledge and usefulness.
Yeah, right. Interestingly, we did have a simulation around that module.
Okay.
So we were able to apply it. So I think that was
brilliant.
Very interesting for us. But that brings us to the end of the professional and serious questions.
Okay.
We have a round of fun questions for you now, sort of like a dean's pick. Okay. So, around Warwick, the university, what are some of your favourite spots to be and some that you would like to recommend?
What are my favourite spots? Well, obviously, if you walk from here up to the medical school, you've got a beautiful bit of countryside. I think, also walking out towards Kenilworth. So I think on campus, the countryside is the biggest seller. It's a beautiful part of the world, verdant countryside. So that's for me. There are certain bits where you, if I think of the conferencing centre, Scarman and Radcliffe, how much time I've spent in there over the years, meeting people, entertaining people, social events. So those are quite special places. And I think, just the business school. It always it's always a pleasure to come into work, and I think we have a lovely building here. But also, I'm incredibly grateful for when I walk in the morning, and you see the cleaning staff, and the building is always impeccably clean every morning. I'm so grateful and appreciative that we actually have such a nice environment to work in. So those would be probably my favourite parts of campus.
That's very interesting. So when not doing podcasts and not being a professor and a dean, where would we find you on a Saturday?
Okay, so the moment I have one son who's 16 later this year. You'll normally find me by the side of a football pitch because he'll be playing football. Okay. Or in the afternoon, if Nottingham Forest are at home, you'll find me at Nottingham Forest as a season ticket holder. So those are the two main, and you probably find me in my local pub after the match for an hour. So the same, and if not, I'll be at home.
That is interesting. And finally, what is your favourite memory of Warwick? Favourite might be... No.
It's a perfectly reasonable question. So I think my favourite memory probably is, and it's so many, it was probably coming back after the first wave of COVID, when we first got back into the office. And it was interesting because obviously everything pivoted online, and it was... so many people had it hard in COVID. COVID was unfortunate. We have a house with a garden. We have a nice family, so incredibly fortunate compared to people who were caught in small flats in areas where there's no outside space. So for me, the one thing which was just lacking was that ability to get back into work and social interaction. It's not, in some ways, it's not a first world problem. So it's more of a first world problem than many others who've had terribly awful time during COVID. But it's coming back into the office and actually meeting people, and just the energy of people re-engaging for the first time after those months was absolutely fantastic, and it kind of affirms the importance of work to you, just in terms of your just general well-being. I think work is so important to have structure and purpose in terms of the week. So that was I remember pulling up outside the building and just it was just the general joy on people's faces as they were reconnecting.
Must be nice to, again, like you said, right, meet people after that prolonged period of time.
Absolutely, yeah. It was really, really nice and affirming in terms of, it just reminded how much you enjoy working with colleagues.
Absolutely. Last is, what one single piece of advice, if you had to share with everyone watching and listening, what would that be? Put you on the spot, but I'm sure.
No, I do remember there was I used to teach in Singapore, and I remember there was a professor there. The student was saying to this professor, "I'm really struggling with the module," and the professor said, "What you need to do is read more and think harder." Okay. And so I'd say that humorously. I think an advice to a student would be, and I'll separate it. The advice to a student would be, the important thing is read it, and read it again. And actually understand, sometimes it takes a long time to get something into your brain, and sometimes it's things that you don't always grasp. There are ideas and concepts where I think 3 years later, I now finally get that. And so it's just allowing yourself the time to actually make sure you've absorbed things. I think in terms of the one piece of advice is when you're facing problems, you've got to break things down into first principles. And so you've got to basically break it and say, what am I witnessing? What am I seeing? And I think that's the hardest bit, is to disentangle signal and noise and get down to what actually am I seeing? What are the constituent parts, and how do I start to approach it? And that's why I know on the MBA we always talk about this balance between theory and practice. The theory gives you an ability, and I'm not just talking from an economics perspective, but in terms of the ability to understand social interactions. It gives us a toolkit and concept to be able to start to frame a response. So that would be, in a very large nutshell, my advice.
Absolutely. And you spoke about response, and the one thing we've been taught in the MBA is your first response should be, it depends.
Well, I mean, societies, so things are very rarely black and white, and so it's most misunderstandings between individuals are down to perceptions. There is a reality, but there's perceptions of that reality, and understanding that people see things in different ways. And I think it's one of the hardest things to do is to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and understand where they're coming from. Because sometimes you think, we've both witnessed X, yet we have such different perspectives on that. And that's because people see it through different lenses. And one part of the skill is understanding that, rather than just telling someone they're wrong.
Right.
It's not very helpful. It's trying to understand why they think like that, and maybe both people need to shift their perspectives and shift their thinking slightly.
Right. Thank you so much for this conversation, and you've given us a lot to think about. And I'm still wrapping my head around the plastic spoon theory.
Okay.
But I'm sure there's a lot more that our viewers will take out of it. But thank you for taking out the time.
An absolute pleasure, and I'm more than happy to come and talk again at some point.
We would love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.